Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to those of you that have been with us throughout our series of webinars today. We are now on webinar 4 of 6 sessions that we'll be doing, and I'm being delighted to be joined by a couple of colleagues and by especially James Squire from Warwickshire Police. We thought we'd do a session on cybersecurity, an introduction to cybersecurity. There is an awful lot of fear, I think, out there would be the right word, and some of it is justified fear and concerns around what's happening with our dear friend the cyber criminal. James is going to take you through some of his views on how you can reduce the risk of you becoming a victim when it comes to cybercrime. Just in terms of a little bit of housekeeping, there is a copy of some cybersecurity slides that is in the handout button that's available for you to download at leisure. We also have within the same control panel, for those of you that have not used GoToWebinar before, within the control panel we have the ability to ask questions and also a chat button. I'm delighted to be joined by Beneba and Debbie, who are running this in the background, so if you have any problems with sound or connectivity, whilst we can't promise to get rid of those technical gremlins, they'll certainly be around to help. What else have we got going on? Save the date. So on the 9th of December, we will be running our final series of GoToWebinars for 2021. That's going to be another day full of webinars. Again, would cover exactly the same format, 6 webinars for each join. And then, as I said before, we'll also have them available on playback for you. And given it's a month before Christmas, we may even have a few prizes and competitions involved there as well. So without further ado and further waffle, I'll hand over to James. James and I have co-presented numerous times. And it's a bit of a standing joke between me and James is that James typically wears a stab vest whenever he's presenting with me, but clearly he feels very safe given we're many miles apart. So James, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, I keep trying to tell Helen that it's nothing personal, but yeah, no stab vest
today. Feels it.
Yeah. I do apologise. Hopefully you can see my screen. Is that shared with everybody? So we'll make a start. So my name is James Squire. I work as a cyber protect officer for Warwickshire Police. I have done 4 years with the West Midlands Regional Organised Crime Unit, where we were dealing with, as much as it pains me to say it, very, very good and sophisticated criminals. And cyber criminals are well and truly on the up at the moment. We've seen, obviously, with COVID and remote working, a huge surge in crimes reported to us, just because that's the nature of criminals diversifying their income streams. It is very, very easy for them to commit these crimes from anywhere in the world, and as a result, it's our fastest growing crime type. So the hope really with this session is just to run through with you some of the most common threats that we're seeing from the crimes that are reported to us, and to give you some advice and guidance around what you can be doing to help increase your cybersecurity posture for your organisation. And then also just a quick mention towards Cyber Essentials as well, which really is our silver bullet in terms of making sure that you've got all of that protection in place to look after that organisation. But to start off, the most common threats that we're seeing at the moment, these being the top ones, definitely at the top for us is ransomware. It's hard to imagine, if you haven't been subject to a ransomware attack before, just how devastating it is to an organisation. So essentially the encryption of all of your data, and the criminals are going to blackmail you and ask you for money to get access back to it. Devastating impacts can put, unfortunately, as we've seen, businesses out of business as a result of it. There's also business email compromise, where criminals are trying to get into your email accounts to do plenty of different nefarious things, whether it's to contact other employees within your organisation, still things like intellectual property, also contact your supply chain if you're not necessarily the target, but somebody else that's part of the supply chain is. Invoice redirection, where they're trying to get companies to pay fake invoices that have been generated to try and divert those funds away from the legitimate bank account. Quite often we see this with things like, please pay this invoice, we've had to change our bank account details due to something like COVID or Brexit, or we just fancy changing banks. From now on, please make sure all of the invoices that we send to you go into these bank details, which happens on a daily basis. We hear about lots of companies on a daily basis where that's happening too, but we're sure it goes on a lot more than even we know about as well. And then lastly, the insider threat. We're seeing a bit of an increase in the last 12 months in terms of rogue employees. Now, insider threat for us is twofold. You've got the rogue employee they're trying to cause damage to the organisation. Maybe it's somebody that's just left the organisation and they're trying to take things like intellectual property or client databases away with them. when they're leaving. And the other side of this is where we're seeing insider threats from the naive employee that's just far too willing and doesn't have a good understanding of what they need to be doing as that end user, and as a result are quite a threat to the organisation just through their behaviours and what they're doing in terms of keeping their things like their accounts secure as well. But the first thing, ransomware. It's a great video to show you guys. Hopefully it plays all okay. We'll give it a go. It shows you what a ransomware attack looks like from both sides, from the company's perspective, but also the criminal's perspective as well. You'll see the tactics that they use through doing a quick look through things like LinkedIn accounts and social media accounts to get an idea of how the company structure is formed, and then impersonating the boss at the company, sending out emails to multiple employees with what looks to be a PDF attachment that is actually an executable file with the ransomware attached. You'll then see the knock-on effect that that has after it's hit the company. The reason why we share this video is because it's quite hard to picture what a ransomware attack looks like without witnessing it for yourself. So you'll see just how simple the tactics were, but executed well, the likelihood of success and the damage that cause and result financial gain to the criminals is incredibly significant. So we'll give it a go playing now.
How did you decide to become a hacker?
Well, I'm not really sure what it means to become a hacker. That's like some guy in a hoodie who types really fast and stays up all night writing code and cracking passwords. It's not me. I just spy on people and see what makes them click. It's not a bad job.
Mark Fuller, the CEO of Qualicard, set to report earnings after their. So you consider this a job?
I put a lot of work into this. I'm not lazy. It takes research to figure out the key players, learn all about them, their families, their friends, what they care about. You have to understand the company's organization. I get a lot of my information from the sales department because they're always so quick and eager. People trust too easily. They don't look at the details. I do. Details matter. That's what I'm good at. It has to look completely believable. It has to look familiar. This is where research is important. It's not some generic piece of spam. It's an email from their boss with their company's signature. It's written in the voice of the boss. It's what he would say if he were writing this.
What about the malware itself? How does that work?
Somebody else out there already wrote all the code that does the actual attack. I'm just using it in the attachment. My skill is in my ability to get a bunch of people to click on that attachment. I always wonder what it's like when the whole thing unfolds on their end, when the panic sets in.
Please leave your message after the beep.
Hey, this is Rashid in finance. Call me as soon as you get this. Something's up with my laptop. I can't. Something going on with our file?
It's really slow. We're getting calls from users on it. Apparently, there's a malware hack targeting our main.
It's ransomware. They're holding us hostage. We're locked out of everything. I can't even check my phone. What about the backup?
That will take days.
We need this fixed now. Just pay it. We don't have a choice. We're reporting earnings in 2 hours.
But how do we know that they'll
pay it? Put every single person on getting us back up and running. That's the only priority now. Okay, it's done. I have the decrypt key. Mark, we have a big problem. The ransomware was just to distract us. They got inside. They got everything. Customer data, financials, everything.
Qualicard is reeling today from the news that hackers have released the personal information of nearly
The
2
Nasdaq
million
closed lower today, led by Qualicard, which was down 14% on news that the recent data breach may be far worse than the company
Its stock
originally
fell
announced.
to a new all-time low on news that CEO Mark Hanning is stepping down after what is turning out to be one of the worst breaches of personal information in recent history.
Do you feel bad about releasing the personal information? All the financials? All the money that was lost?
All I did was get the files. I'm not the one that decided to release them. I'm not the one that shorted the stock. Somebody else had their reasons for that. I was paid to do a job, and I did it well. And that's what's expected of anyone, isn't it? Anyway, markets bounce back.
So as you can see, very, very simple tactics that are used by the criminals, all originating from a phishing email typed in that organisation. But how did we get there? How do we end up with that email? A quick scope of open source, so things like social media accounts of employees, and then looking at things like their company website or things like LinkedIn to get an idea of company structure. Getting in contact with the company directly, whether that's through a website form or whether that's getting in contact with somebody through LinkedIn. Registration of fake websites and domain names that look very, very similar, especially if they're going to imitate somebody within your organisation. Things like changing I's to L's, M's into 2 N's, and simple tactics that the criminal can use to make it harder to spot. And registering those domains is very, very simple. Then create an email account using that domain, and then steal your email signature. So email signatures really, really key in the good attacks that we're seeing at the moment. If you get an email and it's not in the tone of an employee that you're used to working with, and if the email signature doesn't match, then there's immediate kind of red flags. So again, to deceive us, they're going to make sure that the things like the email signature match, so it's even harder to spot, especially if they're interjecting messages within an existing chain as well. And then attachments that look like PDFs, but in reality are actually executable files with a malware attached to it. Now, LinkedIn, absolutely great platform, especially for doing business networking and getting in touch and promoting your organisation. However, we know that criminals use LinkedIn as a way to get an idea of how companies are formed and to get in contact with your employees. Now, this isn't designed to make you stop using LinkedIn, just to make you aware of the information that you share on there. How could the criminals use it against you? Obviously, you've got your name and role in the business. That gives criminals an idea of what access levels you have to business systems, but also what influence and power you may have over other employees, especially if you're a manager or a team leader. What influence do you have if you send a request to somebody that's just started with the business? Your work email, so that they can contact you directly to try and send that malicious software to you immediately to your account, or maybe they just want to strike up a conversation as a prospective client so that they can steal your email signature. And then the bottom one there, interests. What type of email are you more likely to open? This became very, very prominent for a business locally. I think it was ended 2019. I think it was just before COVID. Back when we were allowed to have half marathons. There was an incident where a company had completed their half marathon, had posted all about it on LinkedIn, on their LinkedIn business account, and it was the MD of that company. They decided that it would look good in terms of promotion. The business is involved with a charitable cause, and as you can imagine, the MD in the situation thought, great, this is going to be great news story for my profile. Decided to publish it. Criminals got hold of that article, that post from the LinkedIn profile, and then pretended to be the race organisers because of the awful weather that we had, because it was in the latter part of the year. Unfortunately, some of the course that we used for the half marathon was flooded. As a result, it wasn't the full half marathon distance. So they decided to pretend to be the race organisers, saying, we're really sorry that you couldn't complete the full 13-mile course. As a result, we'd like to refund your admission fee for taking part in a marathon. Please log into your account here and give us your details so that we can process the refund. Now, through those details being shared with the criminals, it cost the business over £60,000 as a result of them conversing with the criminals and giving away sensitive information. And that all started from LinkedIn. So we do know that it's used by criminals. It's just one case of many, unfortunately, where criminals are using that information against us. If they can use information to make themselves seem more legitimate and trick us as the human being into conversing with them, that's the tactics they use. So what can you be doing in terms of protecting your organisation? There's plenty of free advice available from the National Cybersecurity Centre, and they're part of GCHQ. It's their purpose to make sure that it's safe to do anything online, whether it's from within your personal life, more importantly within your work life as well, as we've seen a massive increase in targeted attacks on businesses over the last few years. So what advice have they got available? The first things that I always mention are the small business guide. It runs through everything you need to be doing as an end user, but also how you implement all of those technical controls in place in your organisation to protect your staff members, but also protect the business as a whole. There is also a guide's action list off the back of it, and as you can see there, it's split everything into policy actions, technical actions, and training and awareness. From that training and awareness section, we're more than happy and we do a lot of work with risk of roles and getting that training and awareness to employees. You can utilise ourselves, the cyber protect officers, to come into your organisation and do some end user training. It lasts anywhere from sort of 45 minutes to an hour, just get all of your employees trained up on what they need to be doing to look after their accounts. There's a massive overlap into their personal lives as well. It's a huge buy-in from your employees if you'd like them to have some free training provided by us. The technical actions, obviously the steps that you need to be putting in place to make it difficult for employees to do anything accidentally when it comes to cyber attacks. So things like switching on your firewall, making sure that you've got good password rules, make sure you've got good antivirus in place, and there's technical controls in place on your systems to protect your employees, but also your policy actions as well. So things like how often do you make employees change their passwords? Do you allow USB sticks within the organisation? And how often do you do your backups as well? Split into 3 easy to access sections. There's quite a lot of boxes to tick. Can seem quite daunting at the start. However, you need to be making sure that you're doing all of those sections to make it as difficult as possible for the criminals to get access into your systems. So really, really key and good advice there. There's also the questions for boards to ask about cybersecurity. If you're using managed service providers to get access into your IT systems, and that's provided by somebody else that isn't part of your organisation, it's quite often hard to know what questions to ask when it comes to cybersecurity. It's really difficult to know what question to ask, and then is the answer that you're getting a good answer? Are they taking necessary steps to protect your business? And this guide answers both of that, what to ask and what a good answer looks like as well. So really, really key if you're using managed service providers and any of your IT infrastructure. There is also the response and recovery guide as well. You can put all the policy, technical actions and training in place. Unfortunately, there's no such thing as 100% secure. You can make it as difficult as possible. Something may slip the net. You don't want to see how you'd respond and recover from that. Live, you want to be prepared for it. Make sure that you've got a good business continuity plan in place to see how you'd respond in the event of a cyber attack. A good free guide that runs through the 5 steps of what you need to be doing when it comes to an attack. And then there is also Exercise in the Box, which is a free tool which helps you to tabletop and have a tabletop discussion around different attacks that may target your organisation. Again, similar to the end user training that we provide from the police, we're more than happy to come in and run an exercise in the box session, lasting anywhere from an hour to about an hour and a half, running through some examples of attacks. Generally, the one we do is a phishing attack that leads to a ransomware infection, very much like that video that we saw at the start, and you can see how your business would respond in that situation. If you don't have the ability for us to come in and train your staff and you want to just send them on some e-learning, there is the NCSE Top Tips for Staff training now available. Good bit of kit available if you've got new starters. Build it as part of their induction program with your organisation around what they need to be doing when it comes to their end user cybersecurity. And also use it as a refresher for existing staff that you've got as well. Takes about 20 minutes to go through the training. It's full of question and answer as well. It tries to make it real for people so that they can check that they've actually taken on the information that's been shared in there. And a great tool that's been created by the National Cybersecurity Centre. And then lastly, just a mention from me is around Cyber Essentials. As I said earlier, it really is our silver bullet when it comes to cybersecurity. 5 key controls within your organisation that are looked at. More than anything, it comes with an insurance policy that covers your organisation. If you are subject to an attack, the fact that an insurance company is willing to give you a policy off the back of you achieving these standards says to me the likelihood of them having to pay out is dramatically low. So that was really how I see it as a benefit to your organisation. As you can see there, reassuring customers that you take it seriously as you're able to use the Cyber Essentials badge on things like email, footers and websites. It was also a direct way of saying to the criminals, look, we've got all of these measures in place. We've had an assessment done. We are doing all the necessary to stop you. Don't waste your time targeting our organisation. You get listed on the directory as well. And also it attracts new business. If you're handling any customer data or data within a supply chain, it is a mandatory requirement if you're doing any work with local government authorities, Ministry of Defence and the government. So if you're doing any work with them, it's a mandatory assessment that needs to be done and certification. However, it's now bleeding more and more into the private sector and other industries as well as a baseline requirement. We have the ability for our staff within the Cyber Protect officers to come out and do a bit of an advisor review for you. There is a self-assessment which you can complete as an organisation, and we can help you with those next steps really around what, if you need any support moving forward, just help advise you around what steps you may need to take, whether that be with your IT provider, or before you speak to your assessor to come in and actually get your full assessment done and get your certification. And we can help you with those initial steps and give you some good advice on what you can be doing to help protect your organisation. So feel free, please, to get in contact with us if that's something that we can help with. That's a whistle-stop tour from me, trying to make it as quick as possible, just to give you a flavour of what the main threats that we're seeing and how you can protect yourself and your organisation with those advice packs from the National Cyber Security Centre, Cyber Essentials. So I think we've got some time for some questions.
That's brilliant, James. Thank you very much. And obviously, I'll open up the session now to any questions. I'm going to go pull you back on a couple of things. Cyber Protect training. I know that we've asked you to go and speak with a couple of our clients, and that's not in a, in a very kind of, you're not going to go and find them for doing anything or arrest them or anything like that. It's very much around the information, isn't it? It's around the protect part of your role rather than, prevent and the protect part of your role. Having been in those sessions with a couple of clients, I know they found them phenomenally useful, because you're right, what it absolutely helps them do is helps the members of staff protect themselves in their home life. And we've always believed very much at Risk Evolves that if you can encourage people to adopt and ingrain good habits at home as well as in the workplace, then actually you get this continuous improvement of actions at home that come into work, at work that go into home, and therefore reduce the risk of them being a victim in their home life as well. It's horrible, isn't it, at the moment? Absolutely horrible. And I can say, categorically that, Risk Evolves, even though we do this stuff every day of the week, is targeted. So before we came on the session, James and I were just discussing a phishing email that, or certainly a targeted email, whether it's phishing, I don't know, but certainly a targeted email, which I quite strongly believe has been sent to me. I've got a new starter in the team, and she has been targeted based on the fact that she's just changed employer on LinkedIn, and they're using the fact that she's busy building a relationship with her manager for the first time. The other thing, James, exercise in a box, so underrated, isn't it? But what a fantastic tool it is.
We have our joke, don't we, about the fact that it's been created by GCHQ. They're far too good at keeping secrets, and unfortunately they seem to be keeping it a bit of a secret. But it definitely needs some more promotion around what they've created, really, because invaluable. And
it really is, isn't it? It's an invaluable concept. I mean, as employers, we have to rehearse our staff on evacuating a building in the event of a fire. So therefore, why wouldn't you rehearse your staff on how they'd respond to a phishing campaign? And that's all exercise in the box does, in a really confidential way. I think that's the other important thing to say, isn't it, James? That you wouldn't share anything with the police or GCHQ or National Cyber Security Centre or anything like that.
No, exactly that. When with the web application that you go through, it's very much just like a setup wizard if you're installing software, really, where you click next and click next just to make sure that you're understanding that information, not shared with anybody. You do a bit of a scoring at the end as to how you felt that you performed in certain areas. The only reason why that data is collected but not attributed to anybody is so that if a lot of people are struggling within a certain area of their response, it means that GCHQ and the National Cyber Security Centre can develop more advice to support businesses. So it just gives them a flavour of what extra support we need to be giving. But none of the feedback, none of the online forms are attributed to a business or shared or sent anywhere. So yeah, fully confidential on that front.
The other person we have on the call, well, unfortunately, we haven't got her webcam working, is Mandy Sutton. So one of the team at Risk Evolves. Mandy is my queen when it comes to Cyber Essentials. Mandy's probably done more Cyber Essentials certifications with clients than any other person I've got within the team. I think we've done over the sort of 6 or 7 years that Risk Evolves has been trading. We must have helped companies through about 400 of these now. So it's a really high number. Mandy, what would be your top tips for companies considering going down the CE route?
Okay. Hi. If I'd known, I would have carried on with wearing my pajamas, but I didn't.
Not on camera.
Things that are stumbling blocks with Cyber Essentials that couldn't be cleared away quite easily are what you know about what your setup is. It can be summarised in know your mates, know your rules, know your kit, know your tools. So know your mates, know your IT provider, what they're responsible for, what you're responsible for, who provides your email, who's your AV provider. Does that come under your IT provider, or are you on your own with that? It's up to you. For the rules bit, that's about patching, having the rules in to make sure that you do your Windows updates and you don't just keep putting it off. Your passwords and all of your other policies to do with your people and yourself. And once you've got those policies and procedures in place, you can then apply those to your personal life as well, because whatever you do at work, you should be doing at home as well in terms of protecting yourself and your identity.
Yeah, absolutely.
The kit bit is the kit. What have you got that's accessing your information? Have you got people using their own phones? Do you have a laptop that's kept in a cupboard somewhere and brought out every now and again? Might be brought out and start using before it's had a chance to get its updates on there. And finally, tools. Know your tools. What browsers are you using? What software are you using? Have you got all of that supported? Have you got it updated? If you're using a browser, it's saving all of your passwords. Are you logging into that browser with a personal email address or a work email address? The browser knows an enormous amount about you, and
definitely. That's really useful. Go on, Mandy. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, but all of that is protected by your screen lock.
Yes. Yes. So, James, we haven't touched on passwords, have we, as part of this conversation? I know that you and I usually have a real discussion around password strength. What's the NCSC's guidance at the moment on passwords?
So their baseline advice is to make your passwords as long as possible, so they're harder to crack. The easiest way to make them as long as possible but still easy to remember, as absolutely everybody hates trying to remember their passwords, is just to stack 3 random words together. There's something like a colour, an animal and a place, something like blue, penguin, castle, for instance. So making your passwords longer, not using things like kids' names, pets' names, favourite sports teams, make models of cars, things that could be easily accessed by criminals just through us posting photos on social media, or them being able to do some open source around us to get the answers to our passwords. So make them as random as possible with the 3 random words, but make it easy to remember as well.
And I think one of the other things that we touch on, certainly when we do look at the boardroom toolkit, now the boardroom toolkit that's provided by the National Cybersecurity Centre, it can be a bit hard going, can't it? There's an awful lot of information in that. What advice would you offer to anybody that's possibly on a board of trustees or is working in a charity where maybe this isn't their comfort zone, maybe it's not their day-to-day role? What sort of questions do you think they should be asking of their IT provider?
First thing for me really is Cyber Essentials would be I always say is our silver bullet, is that if your IT provider feels comfortable that they can help you to negotiate the technical actions of Cyber Essentials, that's a big tick for me, in that they feel comfortable to provide those. Things like updates and backups as well are really, really key. So what agreement have you got in place? And if they ever say something like, oh, you're 100% protected or 100% secure about that, be very, very worried. They need to be able to understand the risk and work out whether they're going to reduce that risk, remove that risk, or accept that risk for your organisation, really, moving forward. So having upfront conversations with them, and almost you need them to be a bit of a critical friend and an ally in this, in that if you feel that a technical action, so something like installing 2-factor authentication for your email account, is going to upset staff members, they need to be having that conversation that, yes, it may take an extra 10 seconds to log in, but actually here's the benefit of doing so, looking after their accounts. So it's that delicate balancing act, and it is difficult to know what to ask of those providers, and those are a few things that are contained in that toolkit. You are right though, it's a very, very big document, yeah, but for me it's around backups and updates being 2 of the key ones, and then are they happy to implement the technical controls required for Cyber Essentials certification? If they don't see the benefit of Cyber Essentials, I'd be looking elsewhere, really, in terms of a provider.
Yeah, so we just had a question in, what is Cyber Essentials and how much does it cost? So Cyber Essentials is the National Cyber Security Centre's flagship scheme to help businesses of all sizes. It doesn't actually matter what size of business you are. You could be a micro business up to a corporate, and it also doesn't matter what sector you're in, to take 5 relatively basic controls and apply them to your business. And currently the statistics are, they've been audited to reduce the risk of attack by, or reduce the risk of the consequences of the attack by around 80%. But there's also some anecdotal evidence as well that it could be as high as 93% reduction in the risk of suffering an impact in the event of some sort of cyber attack. So for me as a risk manager, it falls more on the side of, well, why haven't you got cyber essentials, rather than the debate of why should I have cyber essentials. In terms of cost, if you do it yourself, the cost, and this is a standard cost across the industry, the certification cost is £300. That is set across all the certification bodies. If you want some help on how to get through there, on how to answer the questions, on using Mandy's skills and her expertise of navigating through, I think it's about 84 questions now, I think, isn't it, Mandy? Then obviously we are there to help with an appropriate budget to suit everybody. So we're at the bottom of the half hour. Thank you to everybody for joining. Thank you for everybody that's listening on playback as well. James, you've been absolutely brilliant once again, and I would encourage everybody to reach out to James and to ask him to come in and to do some education with employees. You know, James and I have this standing joke that I could do exactly the same presentation as James, but James has just got that other information about real life cases and the fact that he works for the police as well, which just helps to get the message across with those individuals that think that they know it all, or perhaps it doesn't apply to them, and so on. So James is there. If you are not from around Warwickshire, then James, there are equivalents of you, although clearly not as good as you, elsewhere in the country, aren't there?
Yeah, like how that was phrased. Yeah, every police force has got a cyber protect officer. So a version of me that does the same role and has the same remit. So if you've got businesses that fall just slightly outside of the Warwickshire boundary lines, then don't worry. We can find whoever we need to help you with the same support moving forward. So.
Brilliant, thank you very much. We do have other sessions left today, one on website cookies, which is actually going to be quite a technical session, but should be a very interesting one. And then at the end of the day, we close out with a general Q&A on what's happening in the world of data privacy. So thank you very much for joining. Please give some feedback at the end of the sessions. You'll be asked to provide a little bit of response to the sessions so far. And if not, look forward to seeing you again on the future sessions. Thank you very much.